Well, as we approach the holidays, people start doing the fun stuff they do, which is shopping and out and about. And I get to do one of the things that I like to do, people watch. You guys like to people watch? Yeah. I like watching people. People are hilarious. Us humans are funny. And when we know we're being watched, it's funny the things that we do. We're usually on our best behavior. We're a little more polite. Our postures are up a little bit more. We are nicer to people. If our kids are misbehaving, you'll see parents restraining a little bit, keeping their tone down because they're being watched by others. Lovebirds refrain from making out a little bit too much in public. You might even have a lady who's reapplying lip gloss or have her makeup out. People being watched, you're looking your best. But when humans aren't being watched, it's also a funny thing too, because they pick their teeth and pick their nose, especially when they're driving down the road. I watch people a lot on the road, and I make sure people aren't watching me when I'm picking my nose on the road. They look at the reflection in the window, and they all of a sudden may not refrain as much when their kids are being bad, and they lash out in the middle of Walmart and have a meltdown on their kids. Or maybe the same lady that was applying lip gloss is now on lunch break, and she's drooling all over herself, you know? It's funny what we do when we be watched. Now, granted, we probably shouldn't pick our nose or pick our teeth in public, and it's totally okay to apply lip gloss and all of those things, and drool on yourself, especially if it's your own home. But humanity is messy. Just by itself, it's messy. But here's something that we keep trying to do as humans. We keep trying to be unmessy. We try to cover up all the mess. We've been doing this from the very beginning of humanity. But Jesus came into the messy not to get rid of it or to demand that we stop being messy, but instead show us how to live in the mess. We're messy people, right? And that's what we're talking about in this series, that Jesus became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood. And we're exploring a little bit more about what that meant for God to be human in the flesh and what that means for us to be in the flesh. Fleshy is messy. Everybody say that. Fleshy is messy. We are all fleshy and we are all messy. Every single one of us. And Jesus knows what it's like to be messy. He was human. I love the way Hugh Halter puts this in his book, Flesh. He says, can you picture Jesus doing carpentry stuff and smashing his finger, biting his lips, and wincing in painful laughter? Can you see him waking up in the morning and heading to the facilities like an olive tree, looking around to make sure nobody was watching? Did Jesus get gas after a bad meal of hummus and sardines? Probably. Reflect on him in the freezing cold, huddling next to his brother or his mother trying to stay warm. He said it's easy to picture him as a baby, but what about as an awkward teenager with raging hormones? What about a 28-year-old virgin who may be the last single man in his small village? Can you see him working long days with his father, going home exhausted, falling asleep, and then waking with a sore neck and swollen fingers after drooling all night on his pillow? I love the way that's put. Jesus was human. He was messy. He lived in the mess with us. He taught us how to live in the mess. And there's good news in that. And here's what it is. We often feel pressure to deny our humanity, to cover it up, and be more godlike in order to follow Jesus. That's what we think we have to do. That's the pressure that we feel. But Jesus came to show us how and to set us free to be more human, allowing God to be God through us. So the pressure's off. I can stop trying harder. Yes, we don't have to be God. The pressure's off. Everybody take a deep breath and let that out. It truly can be pressure off if we allow it, if we lean into it, if we trust it. The pressure about trying harder can be off. Have you ever tried to make it one day without getting angry or have a lustful thought or a selfless act or a second of worry? Anybody ever try to do that? You just make it through a day? And some of you maybe can. Others of you may be like me. I can only make it a few hours, it seems like. And then what happens sometimes when we're in this mode of trying harder or when the pressure's off, we feel bad, we beg for forgiveness, we commit to try harder, and we start this brutal dance over and over again. But when we deny our humanity and try to become more clean or more pure or more sanctified, we end up on the wrong side of the word godliness. Instead, we become sanctimonious, or self-righteous, or smug, or holier than thou, or pompous, or pious, or a few other words that we become whenever we try to be more holy than we actually are. And lots of people think the good Christian thing to do is I need to read my Bible, check, and go to church, check. Instead of what we've been talking about so far this fall, live as Jesus. Now, reading your Bible and going to church might help fuel living as Jesus, but there's a big distinction between using the reading your Bible and going to church as a measurement of my godliness or using them to actually fuel it. And I think a lot of times we think that's the thing. If we can just be good and do those things, that's how we become holy. In Matthew 3, John the Baptist called a spade when he addressed people who were using religion to say how good they are, their outward appearances. He said, many Pharisees and Sadducees came to be baptized by John. And he said to them, you children of snakes, who warned you to escape from the angry judgment that is coming soon? Produce fruit that shows you have changed your hearts and lives. And if we're not careful, we can do the same thing. Focus on the outward, waiting for a Messiah to come to zap us up out of this bad world. Timothy says they will look like they're religious, but deny God's power. Deny God to work through them. Avoid people like this. And Jesus taught the same thing when he said this. He said, he's talking to the Pharisees. He said, how terrible is it? How terrible it will be for your legal experts and Pharisees, you hypocrites. You're like whitewashed tombs. They become beautiful on the outside, but on the inside they're full of dead bones and all kinds of filth. These are bad things he's describing. Saying when it comes to living like Jesus, living as Jesus, he's saying all of this stuff, being obsessed with the outside, trying to look holy, trying to not be messy. We're messy. Humans are messy. They cry and all kinds of stuff and walk out. And then all the eyes go, whoop, look over here. Then it takes me a little bit while to go, stay with me, guys. That's okay. It's messy. We try to be no mess. That's not even the point. Now, God wasn't messy, but he doesn't expect us not to be messy. Even back in the very beginning, when Adam, God wasn't all of a sudden just shocked. Where's Adam? He's going, Adam, come on. Wasn't shocked by our messiness, even in the beginning. But we keep trying to cover it up. But he came to show us how to live in the mess, to be one of us. Here's the bottom line when it comes to holiness. Jesus' sacrifice on the cross for your sin made you holy and right, period. He did it all. So why do we feel pressure to constantly try harder, try harder, try harder? Or we begin to take credit. When we start to get self-righteous, we start thinking of the stuff that we've done good and where we got our act together and where other people don't our act together. When we start thinking thoughts like that, you know what you're doing? You're taking on the holiness. Rather than saying it was settled because of what Jesus did. The only reason we have holiness is because of who Jesus is and because of the way that he loves us. And that's settled on who we are. It's nothing that we've done. Nothing that we've done. It's all him. In the flesh, we settle who we are with him, which frees us actually to be humans and allow God to do some wonderful things in us. So when stuff happens through us, it's not because we're doing wonderful things. It's because of the God who created us and is doing wonderful things in us. Psalm said, I praise you because I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. After all, God created us, right? He created us. He saved us. He made us holy. And I think when he sees us, even in our messiness, I think he still likes us. I think he still says, this was a good idea. I like humanity. So he thinks you're great. So that's okay. We can take a deep breath and go, whew. Even in my messiness, I can think God thinks I'm great. Maybe I can live as a human. We often feel the pressure to deny our humanity and be more godlike in order to follow Jesus. But Jesus came to show us how and to set us free to be human, allowing God to be God through us. So I can stop trying harder. So if the pressure's off, then that means I get to be human. We get to be human. Fully be human. Now, there's, I guess, good and bad of that. There's brokenness in this world. But I like when the pressure's off. I've actually learned to be more free over the last probably 10 or 15 years of my life, being more settled in my humanity, in my brokenness, because of who God is and the work that he's doing in me. I feel way less pressure to try harder. Instead, I just feel free to cooperate with whatever he's doing inside of me. And I feel way free to let all you guys be human. Because guess what? You're human and messy. And I come in contact with all kinds of human and messy people all the time. And not only do I get to be free, I get to be free not to worry about all of you guys. Like, you get to be you. You're messy. I'm okay with that. The pressure's off. Jesus sets us free to be human. He also knows what it's like to be human. And he says, if you allow my spirit to work through you, you can live as I live. And when we look at the contrast between religious leaders trying to be God, trying to be like God, and then we look at the life of Jesus, we see a drastic difference. It's almost like Jesus was okay with the messy humans. Because he hung out with them all the time, didn't he? He interacted with them. He ate with them. It was almost like Jesus enjoyed being human with all of us humans. And he invites us in to live in that same humanity. So was Jesus human? Yes. Was Jesus holy? Yes. Was Jesus religious? No. Not like the religious leaders of the day. Holiness and religious, two totally different things. Holiness, like I said earlier, is an attribute of God that gets applied to us whenever we place our faith in Jesus. That's where we become holy. We place our faith in Jesus, God applies something to us. We can't make ourselves holier, but we can cooperate with God who's doing good work in us. Holiness defined as personal perfection, that's going to breed judgment, comparison, and condemnation. But authentic holiness, here's what it does. What we see in Jesus' life inspires people in the middle of their mess without judgment. Holiness loves people for who they are, where they are. We see this with Jesus when he does stuff like makes more wine for an already tipsy wedding party. Whenever he sits down and enjoys laughter and a good meal with a corrupt tax man called Levi. When he rebukes back his own disciples for trying to hold the kids from coming to him. He was perfectly holy, but never let his morality, his moral superiority over other people. He didn't like say, hey, because I've never sinned, I'm not going to hold that over you. He actually was with people. Jesus lived with a sense of presence with people. He was with people, messy people. There's this beautiful scene in Mark chapter 5. There's a crowd of people around Jesus. They're crowding in. They're pushing up to him. Everybody's wanting something. When you read Mark chapter 5, it's just a mess of people in there. And there was a woman who had a humiliating sickness who's trying to get to Jesus to be healed. And it said at that very moment, Jesus recognized that the power had gone out of him because she had reached up and just touched him. He turned around to the crowd and said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples had said to him, don't you see this crowd? There's a ton of people. And you asked who touched you? How in the world can you know who touched you, Jesus? They were blown away that Jesus would actually know somebody touched him. But he was present with the people. He knew who was there. He was present to the woman who touched him. He healed her. And today, we don't practice presence very well, do we? Like, my phone is sitting on the chair right there. Like, that's the first time it's been this far away from me, probably in the last 12 or 18 hours. It's terrible, right? It's even closer to me when I sleep. It's like right by my head. We have smartphones in our pockets. The emails are buzzing, going off. It's so countercultural right now to be present with people. So if we sit down like Jesus did with people, like the woman at the well, just to chat, when we call people, when we talk to people, when we interact with people just to see what's going on in their life, when we carve a whole evening out just to have people over at our house, just to be present with people, we're practicing presence. And if Jesus' closest followers, the people that were with him all the time, were amazed at his presence, what about this crazy world we live in if we would just be more present with people? We see him practice his holiness when he's listening and seeing versus speaking. Hugh says in his book, if you wanted to assemble a Mr. Potato Head so that he ended up looking as much like Jesus as possible, I'd suggest you put big ears and eyes on him first. In fact, you should put the mouth on dead last. Isn't that great? Mr. Potato Jesus. Put the mouth on last. Why? Because seeing and hearing is such a part of presence with people. We know the story of the rich young man in Mark chapter 10, verse 21. And it says, Jesus looked him hard in the eyes and loved him. He did that without saying anything? Yep. The eyes. He looked at him hard in the eyes and loved him and had compassion. Eyes are actually one of the most important parts of our bodies and our souls, and to be able to connect with people and interact with people. They reveal so much about us, and when they're open, our eyes are open, all of a sudden we can practice empathy. And when we have empathy, people see that, they know that, they see the difference on our faces. But when our eyes drop or close or when we look away, you know what our body says? That we don't really care all that much, actually. That we really have something else going on. We really have more things happening. In Unique, one of our things that we talk about, live by design over here, live as Jesus. One of the tools that we give people in Unique is a gauge that they're able to kind of quickly each week kind of assess, how's my life going? It's almost like a scorecard for you to say, how am I doing? What's my life look like? And there's 4 categories, and these are 4 categories that we know in culture, like love or relationship is a category, play, work, and health. And then what we encourage people to do is name each one of those categories that means something to you. So play for me is curious kid, because I love being out in competition and playing and getting in the dirt and doing all those kind of things. So that means something to me. But the category that's called love and relationship, what I named that category for me years ago is eye contact. So when I'm starting to evaluate how my love and relationships are going, I'm evaluating that by, am I present with people? Because when I'm sitting at home and Heather's talking to me and I'm scrolling through my digital garage sale called Facebook Marketplace, I'm not present with her. Now I say I'm hearing her, but she knows that I'm not present with her. So when I talk about eye contact, I can know, am I being present with people? Am I caring? Am I loving? Am I leaning into these relationships? Eye contact is part of the incarnation that Jesus lived. When our eyes are open, our ears stay open. We can hear. And when our ears stay open, you know what happens? We can begin to get close to people. We begin to understand people a little bit better. Our hearts begin to open up. Then the hearts lead to our hands and our feet and actions and serving and loving each other. Why? Because our eyes were open and we begin to see people and hear people and know people and love people. But when our eyes are closed, you know what happens? The ears begin to close. And then you know what happens? Something else opens up. And then we just want to talk and talk and talk. And when words fly out of our mouths, and this is the culture that we live in, right? Eyes closed, ears closed, mouth open. Social media has some wonderful things. That's one of the worst things about social media, is I get to say a bunch of stuff, and I don't have to have my eyes open or my ears open at all. And for some crazy reason, Christians in our culture, so many of them feel like this is the posture that we should be taking. Call people out, get loud, yell at them, spew, shout things out, rather than sitting back and seeing and hearing and listening and being a Mr. Potato Jesus. Let's put the lips on at the end. We often feel pressure to deny our humanity or be more godlike in order to follow Jesus. But Jesus came to show us how and to set us free to be more human, allowing God to be God through us. He entered into this humanity, lived in the mess with us, yet he was a perfect human. He was kind of like a native in the best sense. He didn't say, hey, come down here and say, hey guys, sorry, you're going to have to live in this mess for a while. I'm going to be with my dad. Stinks to be you guys. One day I'm going to come back and set you free because you guys are a bunch of idiots. He came and lived in the mess with us. Showed us how to live. Probably hit his finger with a hammer. Probably peed on an olive tree. He lived in the mess with us. He embraced our mess. And then he said, hey, let me actually show you how to live this out. And then he showed us this perfect example. This is what it likes to be the native human. It's why we say becoming human again. Because we're saying, oh yeah, we had somebody to actually show us how to be human. We've been trying to follow what the culture says, but Jesus already lived it out years ago. And all we have to do is say the pressure's off. I get to be human again, and I have an example to follow. Not like he said, figure it out on your own. He said, come, follow me. Learn from me how to love like me. And eventually you just get to live as me. Pressure's off. Jesus lived an incredible life. It wasn't just the few years he lived before the cross. He showed us how to live. It's amazing. And then he says, you get to be my reflection in the world. So when we say live as Jesus, that means we get to represent who he is. It's a beautiful thing. We are earthly people. Earthly. Fleshy, that's messy. And we reveal God's glory to anyone who happens to be watching or seeing or a part of our world. They get to see the glory of God through us. 2 Corinthians says, all of us are looking with unveiled faces at the glory of the Lord as if we were looking in a mirror. We're being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to the next degree of glory. And this comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. Isn't that wonderful? And like a chorus that just keeps singing, Colossians 1:27 says, God wanted to make the glorious riches of this secret plan known among the Gentiles, which is Christ living in you, the hope of the glory. We feel pressure to deny our humanity, to deny our messiness, and be more godlike in order to follow Jesus. Try harder to be more like God. But Jesus came to show us how and to set us free to be human, allowing God's Spirit to work in us and be revealed to this incredible world. I received a compliment a couple weeks ago from a pretty unexpected person. It's a young man. I'm gonna call him Chris. I think he's in his 20s. And I met him at the Mineral Area CPRC, the Psychiatric Rehabilitation Center, that once a month I get to go there and sing and teach and pray and talk and hang out with all of these folks at this place for an hour. And anytime, the last time I was there, he wanted me to hear some music that he had written and some other songs that meant a lot to him and stuff. So I asked the staff, is it okay if we do that? And he had a stroke a few years ago, and so he's got some physical limitations, and he's hard to read. He's a difficult guy to read at times, but I think he's pretty quick. He's pretty bright. So anyhow, we went out. We sat in my truck for probably 30 minutes listening to all this music and stuff. And this is what he said to me. He said, hey, you're a good singer and all, but, and I was like, okay, here we go. It's like, you're a good singer and a good communicator and all, but you know what makes you really unique? He said, you're a good listener. He said, you go around the room and all these people that are hard to understand and hear and be a part of sometimes, and what he's saying, part of what he's saying is, I'm a pretty sharp guy. I got some limitations up here, but these are a big messy group. He said, you go around and you listen and you engage and you hear and you ask questions. He said, you make eye contact. He said, you lean in. He said, you really care about us, don't you? And in that moment, I didn't feel like proud, like, man, I'm a good listener. I've been doing good things. In that moment, what I felt was a sense of this beautiful, beautiful incarnational life of Jesus that I get to live. Not perfect, but not religious. Not trying to be more than I am, but getting to be Jeremiah. Letting God do good work in me, in the flesh, and letting that overflow to other people. And what I felt like him saying is, I'm seeing God in you. You listen, you care, you love. There's something unique about you, and it's not your ability to talk or your ability to sing. It's actually your ability to listen and be present and love people. Man, that was a good compliment for me. I needed that. Messy, with messy people. I don't get it right all the time, but the pressure is off. I don't get to fly off the handle and be an idiot all the time either. That's not the permission we're getting to feel necessarily. But the pressure's off to be God. And the ability's on to just be human. To be me. To be Ethan. To be Josh. To be Tracy. As Jesus living in us, right? Becoming human again is about a process. You don't arrive. And the point isn't even to arrive. The point isn't just someday. The point is we get to live life now. And we can do it without a bunch of pressure to be good. Instead, with just the freedom to be human and a perfect example that allowed us to be human and to say, this is how to be human. Just follow me. Live as I live. Well, how do we do that? Well, we learn from Jesus how to love like him. So we just get to live as he lives in this world. And the pressure's off. And then the hope is that people actually see this beautiful, glorious God because they see a bunch of messed up people, not perfect people, living like Jesus, loving other people. And I find a lot of peace in knowing that God is always present. And what that means is he's present in my reality. And it means wherever I'm going, he's already present. Wherever I've been, he's already present. Whenever I'm with a group of people, whenever I'm at Max CPRC and hanging out with those people, whenever I leave, he's still present. It means he's doing good work all the time. He's always present work no matter where I go. So I don't have to feel the pressure wherever I go anywhere else to be anybody else than just me because God's already there doing what he's doing. And when I begin to see that and when I live that way, most of the time what I'm able to look at is every single person as a friend. They're just a friend in this fleshy encounter that I get to have with them. And they're friends. And it's a moment, an opportunity to be a little bit closer to God and maybe draw them a little bit closer to God and to see what God would do in that. The pressure's off to be God. The freedom is on to be human. And we have an incredible God that shows us how to do it, to allow God to work through us. We've been talking about what it would look like to bless other people. We talked about that app, and I'll give you a moment to download that here in a minute. But I just wonder, thinking about all your neighbors, and when we talk about bless, do you feel pressure to be God to them? Or do you feel permission just to be human and just to love them? That's a great indication sometimes of what we're trying to be or what we're allowed to be. Are we trying to cover up our messy? Are we trying to be holier than we are? Or do we have our life settled on our holiness comes from our relationship with God, and now we just get to be human with all these other messy people around? There's a prayer that I often pray that I think is fitting for the end of this gathering. And the prayer goes like this. This is verbatim what I say to God. God, you be you. I don't have to be me. It doesn't have to be me. God, you be you, and I'll be me. And together, let's do something good. Isn't that good? God, you be you. Let me be me. And together, we'll do something good. So maybe let's just take a moment. Just close your eyes where you're at. And maybe it doesn't have to be that prayer exactly, but maybe that's a great thing to just say to God and to commit to him. It's a great way to say the pressure's off to be God. God, you be you. I'll be me because you came and allowed me to be me. And together, maybe we can live as Jesus. Father, thank you this morning for not just coming, dying on the cross, freeing us from sin, so that someday we get to be with you forever. We thank you for that, but thank you for also living among us, showing us how to live. Thank you for inviting us into this process, for not abandoning us for thousands of years until we see you again, but instead giving us your Spirit, the incarnation in us, being with us every moment, every day, that we get to be with you, live with you, walk with you, live as you, impact this world as you, every single day, Lord. We're thankful for that. Help us to walk out of here a little more free, lighthearted, feeling like, oh, our messy is okay, and that we get to follow your example to how to live in this mess. We love you, God. We ask this in your name. Everybody said? Amen. Amen.